This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by Barracuda. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your team to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now. Go to barracuda.com/cyberwire. That's barracuda.com/cyberwire. Amazon resolves its Tuesday outage as observers wonder about cloud risks, a standoff at the Russo-American Summit, a look at the arbitrage process that governs the criminal-to-criminal market. Carol Terrio reads the fine print. Andrea Little-Limbago looks at global regulatory regimes. A DeFi platform asks for its stolen money back, and a guy looks for his private key in a physical garbage dump. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Wednesday, December 8th, 2021. Amazon Web Services says it's back after an outage yesterday afternoon that centered on the U.S. East Coast and had geographically wide-ranging effects. Media coverage focused on disruptions to package deliveries, the interruption of online entertainment channels, and the unavailability of various home IoT and media devices like Alexa and Ring security systems. But the outage was striking in the extent to which it disrupted cloud services that businesses and agencies have come to depend upon. At 9:37 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Amazon first reported impact to multiple AWS APIs in the U.S. East 1 region and said the issue was also affecting some monitoring and incident response capabilities. The first notice said, "We have identified the root cause and are actively working towards recovery." Users had been reporting outages for some time before Amazon's announcement. The AP tweeted the story about half an hour before Amazon's first disclosure. Breaking, the Wire services said, users say Amazon Web Services is suffering a major outage. The company provides cloud computing services to individuals, universities, governments, and companies, including the Associated Press. Amazon has yet to comment on the outage, and few details are available. End quote. Amazon provided brief updates throughout the day. At 4:35 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, AWS reported the issue resolved about 8 hours after disruptions began to be reported. Their final update read, quote, "With the network device issues resolved, we are now working towards recovery of any impaired services. We will provide additional updates for impaired services within the appropriate entry in the Service Health Dashboard." End quote. Quartz argues that the incident, which was by all accounts an accidental outage and not the result of an attack, shows how dependent commerce, the IoT, and the cloud have become on AWS. We heard from the SANS Institute while the incident was in progress. Ed Scotus, president of the SANS Technology Institute, wrote, quote, "This is yet another glimpse of how interconnected our services have become, with the immense complexity of cloud deployments impacting large numbers of enterprises and consumers. Cloud services are generally well-run and suffer fewer outages than individual organizations' networks. That said, when there's a bump in the night for a cloud provider, it impacts a huge number of users and often in unexpected ways. We seem to be getting hit with these kinds of outages every month or two, and that's disheartening. So far, the vast majority of them are from operational errors, misconfigurations, or bad software updates, and not a cyber attack." End quote. His colleague, John Pescatori, director of emerging security trends at the SANS Technology Institute, sees a risky monoculture and advises organizations to look for redundancy and reserve capability. Quote, Outages like this one and earlier ones at AWS happen regularly across cloud service providers and most commonly are due to self-inflicted wounds. A cloud service level agreement of 99% uptime still allows almost 8 hours per month of downtime. Businesses need to invest in redundant or backup capabilities or pay for higher levels of guaranteed availability to preserve critical business services when running in the cloud. Larger businesses also need to look at their suppliers and see if they are subject to concentration risk. Too high a percentage of suppliers on one cloud service, and even a short outage can be disastrous to business." End quote. Reports from yesterday's Russo-U.S. summit indicate that both sides held their lines. Bloomberg quotes Russian sources as calling the tone frank and businesslike. President Putin demanded an end to U.S. activity Russia regards as threatening. President Biden warned that Russian invasion of Ukraine would draw severe economic sanctions and additional military aid to Kiev. Reuters reports that Russian sources say the two presidents committed to further talks and emphasized that Russia's principal interest lies in obtaining assurances that NATO won't deploy offensive strike weapons in the near abroad. The reports all suggest that the prospect of more widespread fighting in Ukraine was the principal focus of discussion, but it's important to remember that cyber operations now precede, accompany, and follow kinetic fighting. Researchers at TrustWave's Spider Labs have been reading the chatter in Russophone criminal circles, and they see signs of unease. Recent high-profile enforcement actions have put them on guard, and many posts suggest that a sense of being protected by the Russian government may be eroding. Some of the posts show a good mastery of the paranoid style, like this one, quote, "Incidentally, there are the recent secret negotiations on cybercrime between the Russian Federation and the United States." End quote. There are other laments that suggest a sense that their world, too, may pass away. Quote, "In politics, individuals often become a bargaining chip from ancient Rome. There are no guarantees that Article 272 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation will never be applied because of the criminal operations to those who work in the U.S. And yes, Putin is not eternal. Who will replace and what will be the foreign policy agreements, relations, and the internal accents in law enforcement practice, no one knows." End quote. Indeed, who does know? Although Mr. Putin and his legacy don't seem to be going anywhere soon. In any case, TrustWave thinks that, however unstable the ground under their feet may now be feeling, the cyber gangs are likely to stay put in a geographical sense. They know their home turf, having survived there so far, and are likely to feel safer in an arguably friendlier and perhaps more corruptible environment than they might encounter elsewhere. But the gangs are getting wary, and that's probably, on balance, a good thing. Researchers at Analyst One have found that the cyber underground has its own courts, forums for resolving disputes among criminals. The process is generally referred to as arbitrage, and the plaintiffs typically ask for compensation ranging from hundreds to thousands of U.S. dollars. Most criminal communities, and these are most usefully defined by the languages in which they conduct their C2C business, has its arbitrage process. Analyst One explains how it works. Quote, "To initiate the process, the accuser must open a thread in a dedicated subforum that usually has the title court or arbitrage and provide the following details: a brief of the claim, the nickname of the defendant including the link to his profile, and the defendant's contact information from Telegram, Jabber, or email address. The process doesn't preclude direct action by an aggrieved party. If they're angry enough, they'll retaliate, usually by posting full identifying details about their adversary in a place where the authorities can find it, and where other criminals will know that the hood who's failed to deliver or otherwise cheated a colleague is someone to avoid." Vice reports that Badger DAO, which last week lost about $119 million to criminals who rifled its decentralized finance, that's DeFi platform, has asked the crooks to please return what they stole. Vice quotes Badger DIO as saying to the unknown crooks, quote, You have taken funds that do not belong to you, but we are willing to work with you and compensate you for identifying this vulnerability in the systems. We are providing you with a direct line of communication to discuss a peaceful resolution without involving any outside parties. Contact us to discuss further and do the right thing on behalf of the community." End quote. So the hope would be that they'd be able to cut their losses and turn the episode into a kind of bug bounty payout. And what would be in it for the criminals? If they're not hardened crooks, but perhaps hackers in it for the lulz, it might offer them a way of climbing down from an uncomfortable perch. Or it might be a way for actual criminals to maybe limit their legal exposure if they're feeling the hot breath of the law on their neck. And hey everybody, the New Yorker says, this guy in Wales has been rooting through dumps looking for an old gaming hard drive he tossed out after he spilled juice on it, forgetting that the same drive held the private key for some early Bitcoin mining he'd done back in the day when mining was young and relatively cheap, more a matter for hobbyists than for speculators. It would be worth, well, a whole lot, he thinks, if he could find his way back into that wallet. The New Yorker's headline says there's maybe $500 million in that dump. And now, a word from our sponsors, KnowBe4. So, what's a con game? It's a fraud that works by getting the victim to misplace their confidence in the con artist. In the world of security, we call confidence tricks social engineering. And as our sponsors at KnowBe4 can tell you, human error is how most organizations get compromised. Where there's human contact, there can be con games. It's important to build the kind of security culture in which your employees are enabled to make smart security decisions. To do that, they need new school security awareness training. See how your security culture stacks up against KnowBe4's free phishing test. Get it at knowbe4.com/phishing test. That's knowbe4.com/phishing test. And we thank KnowBe4 for sponsoring our show. We are all familiar with the standard routine when faced with pages and pages of fine print. For most of us, just click agree and be done with it. Our UK correspondent Carol Terrio says, not so fast.
Okay, so analogy time. To drive home the point about privacy, I want us to think about dating. Like when you go out on a date, one obviously puts their best foot forward. And it makes sense that someone wouldn't want to lead with something that they are insecure about, say a behavior or attribute. You might focus on your winning personality instead of your paunch, your beautiful eyes, and not your crooked front tooth. And these aren't lies, but they are characteristics that you have highlighted as your most attractive points. The things that might get someone to do a double take in the gym or supermarket or swipe right on a dating app. And I'm comparing this to how companies behave. In the same way that someone wants to date you, companies want to secure your business. There's this idea in the business world of a unique selling point or USP, and it basically refers to what a company wants to shout loudest about or what's better than the main competitor out there. Could the company have a complete deal breaker hidden in their closet that if you knew about, you would be looking the other way? Sure. And that's why they're going to keep it hidden until they secure your business. So, for example, if your service has a longer lag time when performing a task, the website might crow about how it's cheaper than the competitor. Or if your device design is not the best, you might focus on the neat configuration options you've added to stand apart from the crowd. If you provided a streaming service, you might talk about the sheer amount of content available, not the fact that you are hoovering up millions of data points about the viewer for increased ad revenue generation. You get my drift. They shout about the good, they hide the not so good, all in the aim of securing your business. And you might find out about a potential deal breaker. But like in the dating world, it sometimes will be too late because you've already committed, or it's just too difficult to extricate yourself. And this, my dear listeners, is why you look at the terms and conditions, the legalese. This is where they can reveal a few things about how they operate that you might be fine with or really not fine with. The thing is, in the legalese, the statements they make are legally tenable. I cannot think of a company that leads with how they process your data for their benefit, but they have to tell you about it in the legal statements. So before you download an app or purchase a smart device or online service, check the terms and conditions and the privacy statements. And when they get updated, review these changes. I promise it's worth it. You might find out that some companies are completely above board, but you might also find out that some are scraping the barrel. This was Carol Theriault for the CyberWire.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Recorded Future. Staying one step ahead of the rapidly evolving threat landscape requires a constant flow of daily intelligence. To stay up to date on everything happening in the world of cybersecurity, join over 50,000 other security professionals who subscribe to the Cyber Daily. With daily email updates on the latest cybersecurity news, top threat actors, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more, the Cyber Daily is the first thing security professionals check every morning. To learn more and subscribe for free, go to recordedfuture.com/cyber-daily. And we thank Recorded Future for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Andrea Little-Limbago. She is Vice President of Research and Analysis at Interos. Andrea, it's always great to have you back. I wanted to touch today on things that you're tracking when it comes to the regulatory situation globally. I mean, what are we seeing in terms of trends there?
Yeah, there are a lot, to be honest. And so we often think about how technology advances, exponentially and so forth, but policy lags well behind, and it has. We've seen that. Policy is really trying to catch up right now, and we've seen it over the last couple of years, and it really just expanding in a significant amount as well. And so what we've seen, in the last couple of years, GDPR on the privacy side really has kicked off a lot of big focus and impetus towards focusing on privacy, and that's had a lot of global repercussions. Both, Brazil's had a similar law that was passed. California. Again, they mirror, they're not identical, but they mirror and they lean and learn from each other.
Yeah.
But most recently in the U.S., Colorado, Virginia passed one this year. And so we're seeing a lot in that regard, even to the point, and the interesting component for that is that China's data privacy law just came into effect on November 1.
Right.
And that also actually borrows a decent amount from the GDPR, which may surprise a lot of people, but it's part of their broader focus on reining in the tech companies as well. Mm-hmm. And so it takes aspects such as data minimalization and transparency, data transfer requirements, and so forth. And so it does actually, some of it you can read sounds somewhat similar to the GDPR as far as mirroring it. But a core aspect of that one that the other privacy laws don't have is it still enables tons of access to the data by the government. So basically still is, government can still do what they want to do with the data, have access upon asking for it, complements their other cybersecurity and data protection or data security laws that have come into play in the last few years as well. So that's a very big distinction.
Privacy in air quotes, right?
Yeah.
With the Chinese.
But it is interesting, because they are reining in big tech in a very different way than what we're seeing in the US and in Europe.
In general, we've had GDPR active for a while now. How are people looking at it? Is it generally considered to be a success? Is there more to be done, or are people disappointed it hasn't done more? Where have we landed with that?
I think all the above is where people have landed.
Okay. It depends on who you ask.
It depends on who you ask. Lawyers will have a lot of issues because some of it wasn't detailed enough. In some cases, it became apparent that the legal infrastructure for actually seeing a lot of the cases that wasn't necessarily in place when GDPR came into effect. And so there have been a lot of learnings in that regard, where I'd argue it's been a huge success is really just in promoting the notion of data privacy for individual data privacy rights. And so if we were to focus on that as a metric, I think it has been a huge success as far as basically empowering and influencing other forms of similar regulations across the globe. It also does counter what we're seeing a lot as far as more government access to data. It's basically the counterweight to that, which is desperately needed. So I think in that regard, it's also been a success. But there's a lot, I think, more that needs to be done. A lot of lessons have been learned, and that's where I think it's actually really interesting, where you start seeing how Brazil, or how some of the different states in the U.S., how some of the countries across Africa actually are also about 100 different, or not 100, about 50% of the countries have now enacted some level of data privacy law there, and much of it influenced by what's going on in the GDPR. So it's interesting seeing how different countries are starting to implement aspects of it, which I also think can help inform the GDPR as it continues to grow and evolve. I look at least as almost a starting point and not the end point. I think it's going to continue to evolve after some learnings and so forth, but I think it's had an enormous impact.
Yeah. All right. Well, Andrea Little-Limbago, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, Inky. Catch fish before they breach your network with Inky's innovative technology that integrates with existing security. See how at inky.com. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karp, Baru Prakash, Justin Sabi, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. It's time to take a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Arctic Wolf. Spending unnecessary time and resources on noisy tools and alert triage could be costing you more than you realize. Alert fatigue isn't just an overwhelming annoyance, it can be a major risk and undermine your organization's security posture. Dealing with tool overload, staff burnout, skills shortages, and relentless alerts aren't sustainable for an organization. So, what's a team to do? The experts at Arctic Wolf have made it possible for you to calculate how much money your company is losing while putting together a plan to reduce your alert fatigue. Visit arcticwolf.com/cyberwire to use their alert fatigue calculator and learn how much your organization is losing to alert fatigue. And we thank Arctic Wolf for sponsoring our show.